Biden has an edge on Trump. And Mr. Biden and his advisors remain stuck at home, uncertain if their Philadelphia headquarters will ever reopen. Less than 6 months before Election Day, Mr. Biden finds himself in an extraordinary position. Party leaders have quickly united around him, and he has an edge over President Trump in most polls. Mr. Biden's inability to influence the debate about the coronavirus and the nation's economic collapse has worried some Democratic allies, donors and former Obama administration officials, who want Mr. Biden to be more visible. Mr. Trump has his own enormous problems, politically, and he and his campaign have yet to get a handle on Mr. Biden, veering from attacks over China to personal jabs at his mental acuity and his son Hunter. Still, even some Democrats who are optimistic about Mr. Biden's chances say they are worried about whether he and his operation are ready for the campaign of personal destruction that Mr. Trump is expected to accelerate. The circumstances could hardly be more difficult for Mr. Biden. But interviews with more than 24 donors, advisors, activists and party strategists paint a portrait of an operation that is also exhibiting some of the same difficulties that proved troublesome in the primary, slow decision-making processes, and multiple power centers across Mr. Biden's sprawling political network. Generational differences between some longtime Biden advisors and younger operatives, inadequate staffing, and a tendency to be reactive in the face of controversy. In recent days, the Biden campaign has started its biggest hiring spree since entering the race, fortifying the thin team that carried him through the primaries with additions ranging from new deputy campaign managers to digital experts. And despite facing the most forbidding political environment of any president seeking re-election in decades, Mr. Trump still enjoys significant advantages. Although Mr. Biden matched the president in fundraising for April, Mr. Trump and his party began the general election with an advantage of nearly $187 million and an advanced digital operation. Already, Mr. Trump's re-election team is directing a $10 million ad campaign at attacking Mr. Biden. Mr. Biden's campaign does not have the financial firepower to answer on air, but this week it did produce an anti-Trump ad on the coronavirus that quickly racked up millions of views, the kind of insurgent maneuver that allies had been anxiously waiting for. In many respects, Mr. Biden's candidacy continues to test the proposition that in an election dominated by the coronavirus and Mr. Trump's conduct as president, the former vice president can win by running a steady, low-key campaign that appeals to a broad coalition. Democratic voters rewarded Mr. Biden for that approach in the primary, despite his uneven performances on the campaign trail, but a general election may test Mr. Biden and his campaign in a more strenuous way as he faces a wider audience of voters across the ideological spectrum. Some of the Biden campaign's vulnerabilities were laid bare in recent weeks as he confronted an accusation of sexual assault by Ms. Reid, a former aide in his Senate office in the 1990s. Mr. Biden waited more than 5 weeks to address the matter directly, personally issuing a forceful denial, only after a chorus of Democrats had urged him to speak out and several of his female surrogates fielded the issue first. In the meantime, the issue gained traction in social media posts by conservatives, Trump campaign officials, and some in the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. At one point Mr. Biden taped a video statement detailing his work combating sexual assault and harassment. But his team is keenly sensitive to the health risks, including those for the 77-year-old Mr. Biden himself, and to the need for Mr. Biden to model the respect for scientists and doctors that he argues Mr. Trump has flouted, a point Mr. Biden made on ABC's Good Morning America on Tuesday. Mr. Biden has spent considerable time fundraising, and he routinely receives briefings from public health and economic experts. Mr. Biden's had about 375 in March 2020. In fact, Mr. Biden entered April with the smallest campaign staff of any Democrat since at least John Kerry in 2004. All campaigns quickly become bureaucratic. That is especially the case for a seasoned politician, like Mr. Biden, who is surrounded by layers of family members, longtime friends, and advisors from different corners of his political universe. Some also worry that Mr. Biden is relying on a strategy that's too focused on Mr. Trump's self-inflicted wounds, and fails to articulate his own vision for the country. Still, many Democrats are eager to give Mr. Biden room to maneuver. Mr. Biden's campaign manager, Jennifer O'Malley Dillon, assumed her new role just as the coronavirus hit. Thanks for watching. Please do like, share, and subscribe.